Welcome back to Red at the Wire. Well, we're going to take a look at Santa Anita's card on Memorial Day, and we're going to do the late pick four sequence, which does include a couple of stakes races, the Shoemaker Mile and the Hollywood Gold Cup. So let's take a look. First leg of the late pick four is the seventh race at Santa Anita, and it's the Grade 1 Shoemaker Mile. It's a run on mile on the turf for 3-year-olds and up. And let's take a look at the field. We have number 1 is Gold Phoenix. And he's an obvious use for those of you who recall California turf racing. He's third off the layoff. It's a custom fit distance. He's been in the money 9 out of 11 starts on the turf, and he's 2 for 2 at a mile. I mean, there's no reason not to use him. He's a logical use. Hong Kong Harry is interesting in that. The last time he ran in a mile and an eighth in the Turf Classic at Churchill Downs last time, and he did pretty well, got a decent second to up to the mark. But the real interesting thing is if you go back in his running lines, the last time they cut back from a mile and an eighth to a mile was last year at Del Mar, and it resulted in a victory in the Del Mar Mile. So it's a winning formula and it works, and so. If they do go back to that again, I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be a win candidate and a contender, so he's a definite use. Du jour is that rarity, a Bob Baffert horse on turf. Obviously not his strong suit. He doesn't do it too often, but he's okay. Usually has good stock, so we can kind of forgive a little bit. If you look at this one, isn't too bad. Did pretty well in the Kilrow Mile, a couple back. It's really more of a question if this one can raise his game against the really top ones at 8 years old, and that's the biggest question mark I have. It's 6 to 1. That's a fair price for a Bob Baffert, and you do get Luis Saez, but I don't see anything in particular here to get me real excited about this one's chances. So I'll leave it up to you if you want to use. That's fine, but to me, it's just maybe an exotics possibility is the best. Flavius, trained by George Papadrodromou, and you got Big Money Mike in the irons. This one comes off of the San Francisco Mile, where had an okay fifth in a Grade 3 race, and you see the prior Grade 1 efforts in the Kilrow Mile and the Pegasus World Cup turf were not very promising. I tend to believe the class is a little high for this one. And I think maybe a pace factor perhaps, but aside from that, I don't see this one factoring, particularly at 8 years old. I think the best days are more than likely behind. Il Bellator is coming off second off the layoff, which is a really nice angle for this trainer. But again, this one is coming from the San Francisco Mile. It's a Grade 3. That was the biggest class test for this one to date. It is encouraging that he ran a career high buyer in his debut at 4 in a graded stakes race. So I think that's encouraging. I would think this one would be best suited probably underneath at 20 to 1. You get a pretty good price, but you always got to wonder too, since that effort was so much better than anything he'd run before, that maybe a bounce is likely. So if you're going to use, I'd use with discretion. Exalted is Peter Yurton's running red hot right now, and he's got Juan Hernandez in the irons. They're 58% over the last 12 together, so obviously there's some expectations here. This one is 3 for 3 since they switched him to turf, and 3 for 3 at a mile. So he's obviously in a wheelhouse distance for him. The question really is, more than anything, is this is a big step up in class from a Grade 3. He has passed every test so far. The only thing you do have to worry about, he's 6 years old and he's run 3 straight 93s. I think he'd have to jack it up a little bit more to factor in this race. It's certainly possible, but he's on a good run, but he's not running any faster. So that's sort of the thing you have to think about. But I could see using underneath for sure. Balnikov is a fairly inconsistent horse in my mind, and I never really been a big fan. He won the San Francisco Mile last time, and he is coming third off the layoff, and he's got Umberto Rispoli for Phil D'Amato, Mr. Turf in California. But Grade 1 material, I'm not so sure. You see the Kilrow Mile in the start previous was not a great effort, running against many of the same horses in this race. And I don't see anything to tell me that this one is going to burst forward, especially just running the career high buyer. If anything, I think a regression might be possible, so I'm not going to use. Cabo Spirit is coming into this race coming out of a key race. That Maker's Mark mile, I mean, look who you had here. Chez Pierre, Modern Games, Up to the Mark have all come out and won, and there's a couple more from that who've also come back to win as well. So you can't ignore that. This one is in really good form right now, and I think it was 52-1 in the last race and ran fourth, and was third for quite a bit of the race. So that's a pretty good effort. And obviously this one's on the upswing. And I think you absolutely have to include, particularly at 15-1, if you get anything close to that, that's outstanding value. And this one, coming out of key races, you could very well steal it. Lamplighter Jack, I just don't think is good enough. Really more than anything else. You see was a pace presence in the San Francisco Mile and then faded quickly. I expect probably the same type of effort here, maybe a pace presence, and could jack it up a little bit for horses like Gold Phoenix to come from behind, but that's the extent of the involvement here. Irideo is trained by Marcelo Polanco, and he's just a cut below, and another one that this is a really big field, that's true, but a lot of these are usually the case. It's that they're not quite up to it. He did get a second in a grade 3 last time, but this is a grade 1 and he is 7 years old. You can go back to September of last year and see he had a good second in the Del Mar Mile to Hong Kong Harry. But a lot of the horses that are in this race have already beaten him before, and I don't see him beating them again in any scenario I can see here, so I would toss this one. Salesman is kind of, this is basically if you want to take a flyer on a horse, because he's trained by Richard Mandel, who's really having a hot meet so far. It's a hot barn, but he's bringing in shippers isn't necessarily something that he does all the time. You look at this one's been running at longer distances for the most of his career. And so now you're cutting back to a mile, and he is by Dubawi, who horses tend to run all day. Marathon distances are more for their liking. So you wonder if this is maybe a tune-up. It's kind of a weird place at grade 1 to have a tune-up, but Wertheimer and Frere are the owners, and you'll remember some of their better ones like Goldakova. It's a pretty big outfit. So if you want to take a flyer at 8-1, go ahead. I'm probably going to wait one. Knowing how Richard Mandel is pretty cautious with horses and takes his time. The tab looks pretty decent, so there are some things to like, but I also have to think about ticket size. And if you want to use them, go ahead. But I'm probably going to hold off. The second leg of the late pick 4 is the 8th race. It's the Group 1 Gold Cup, or the Hollywood Gold Cup, as many of us remember it. This is run at 1.25 miles on the dirt for 3-year-olds and up, and you do see they got to extend this track all the way, so it's running out of a chute, and so to use the full track. So there's plenty of time to get position in the first time around. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. It's not quite like you're running into a turn quite as quick. Number 1 is Country Grammar. Needs no introduction. I mean, he's a multiple graded stakes winner in California and Dubai. The only question I have about this, about the entry here, is it's a little short from the amount of time they normally give him off after he's raced in Dubai. You see, last year at this time, they gave him 3 months off before he ran in the San Diego Handicap, and this time they're bringing him back a little short, more on 2 months off. And it does take a while for horses to readjust from Dubai. So that's really my only concern. He's certainly a win candidate here. You have to use. But I just wonder about coming back from Dubai a little early. That's all. But other than that, all the connections are there. And we know he can get the distance. So he's a definite win candidate. You kind of have to use. Senior Buscador is kind of interesting. Todd Fincher, we've noted before, he does a lot of good work in the Southwest. Out at Sunland Park and others, and this one has been a pretty good horse. He's progressed pretty nicely, so I think that the Oakland race, he ran his career high, or near his career high buyer, and had kind of a troubled trip. So we can sort of draw a line through it. And it is third off the layoff. Really, the question is class more than anything else. He is taking a fairly big step up. You got some other couple in here that are grade one world class horses. So, and he does need some pace to run to. I'm not sure he's going to get it here in a small field. So those are really the issues. I think under would probably be more likely. But to win this, he would absolutely need his best, I think. Yes, this time it looks like a field filler to me. You only got 6 in this race, and it seems like they reached out to try to fill this out for Country Grammar and to fund it. It seems like this one hasn't really run on dirt very much. I think he's only had one start and got a 34 buyer. So predominantly has been running on turf. And if you notice, the last couple were a far cry from grade 1 stakes. They were optional claimers, and this one didn't win either of the last 2. So you do have to wonder about the placement a little bit. And it's really kind of hard to recommend. Mark Glatt is a nice trainer. He's having a good meet. And I think it's Kiyoshi Kimura is been a good jockey since coming from Japan. Turf to dirt's a pretty good angle. There are some things to like, but you just have to wonder. A grade 1 dirt race at a mile and a quarter, after being on turf for so long. So it's more of a, if you want to roll the dice a little bit, but I'm not going to bother. Second to Country Grammar would likely be defunded, and I'd actually probably give him a better chance to win this. There isn't much pace in this race. He did show a new dimension in the California where he rated, which I didn't think he could do, and he actually pulled off the victory. So that's an added dimension, something else he can do. But in this case, it would be much better for him to get on the lead because there really isn't any other pace. The big question is the distance for me, really, because he's only run at it a couple of times and he hasn't won either time. He's dialed in you would think would be a 2-turn type of sire, but he's really not. He gets more sprinters. He's got mineshaft and, he's got some 2-turn pedigree to a degree, but his primary sire is more sprinters. So I wonder about the distance a little bit. He also may not need an all-out effort to win this because it's not the greatest field aside from Country Grammar. I mean, a Bob Baffert exacta is very likely in this spot. But I think this race sets up well for him, and I think you have to use him. It's only logical. Paroli is really another one that's outclassed. You see, he's never run a 90 buyer, and that's certainly not even close to anything that would be competitive here. I might consider this one for underneath only because of Kent DeSormo. You can see he's riding very well at Santa Anita right now. And in big stakes races, just like his brother as a trainer, Kent DeSormo finds a way to get horses involved. Mike McCarthy is a nice trainer, and he's underrated in many respects, but he's sneaky good. And so if this one's going to run his best race to be involved, he'll do it. And so, but I'm not as a win candidate, but I think you definitely want to think about underneath. Kiss Today, Goodbye. I don't, to me, ran the Californian last time and got an okay fourth. Wasn't really much of a match for defunded. You look at, and that's for almost at the top or about the highest. This one's gone in quite some time. So I think that at 6 years old, a grade 1 ask is pretty big considering if you go back to the last grade 1s here I see are the Santa Anita Handicap and the Pegasus World Cup, and he was up to track in both. So despite the fact that it's a smaller field, I mean, maybe underneath, 6 horses, you can basically use them all in your try if you want to, but not a win candidate for sure. The third leg of the late pick 4 is the 9th race, and it's an allowance N1X for non-winners at 2 lifetime. Fillies and mares, 3-year-olds and up, and it's on the turf at a mile. Number 1 is Ultimate High. It's trained by Carla Gaines, good turf trainer, and coming in third off the layoff. Has run 2 sprints in a row in class, and has been fairly decent. The concern I have with this one is tends to can be rank and has a little problems with the gait at times. And so not the most trustworthy of horses, but I think is a class fit here. Stretching out shouldn't be a problem. And like I say, Carly Gaines, good trainer, third off the layoff. Joe Bravo's been doing pretty well at Santa Anita. So I think this one you can possibly use. Eleuthera looks really good to me. Number one, because he's one of the few pace presences in this race and is in really good form. You see, the last time got matched her career high buyer at 4 and has been trending upward. And I always love to see in the running lines the comment gamely, which means that they just were full of run and just weren't going to be denied that day. You got Mario Gutierrez and Redham Racing, top flight outfit, and Ben Cecil is red hot right now and has won 2 out of the last 3. So I think this one's an obvious use, and at 10-1, that's a great price. I think this could be a really solid win candidate. Might upset the apple cart. My favorite daughter is trained by Vladimir Serin, who's always dangerous, and you do get Juan Hernandez in the irons. I believe they're pretty good together. It's not necessarily a lock solid combination. You do look at this one. The last was on the dirt, and it was a starter allowance, and it was kind of an okay effort, nothing to write home about. But if you go back, you look at some turf form here, and this one fits within the class. And at 4 years old, runs back to some of the previous efforts at 3. I think that'd be competitive here. And it's more than likely that switching back to the preferred surface, this one could very well run a better race. The last 2 weren't the greatest, but again, I think Serin is a pretty dangerous trainer, and I'm guessing that this one will be ready to roll. Rebel Girl, I just don't really see it here. Just look, has recently broke the maiden and then going against winners for the first time. Has been okay, nothing great. Has been getting freshened up a little bit. You do get Luis Saez, but this one really doesn't look to be improving, and that's really the bottom line to my reservations, is that you like to see that steady growth. And now stretching out, it doesn't. I wouldn't expect this one would have as good an effort as perhaps on the sprints, so I would look elsewhere. Emerald Lake is trained by Peter Miller and coming off a layoff. So you do have the 4-year-old debut, and it is finished up. Did okay at 3. Pretty much seemed to be plateaued a little bit. You can see a lot of 78s there. So when I start seeing that, I don't know how much more improvement there's going to be, but it is possible coming off a layoff. At least, 8-1, I probably want a little better price than that, but this one probably is better suited for underneath, I would think. Mont France, Phil D'Amato, Mr. Turf in California. He's got a couple in this race, and this one isn't one of the more encouraging ones, I don't think. The buyers look a little light, and the last was not a very good effort in a sprint. So, you have to respect the barn for sure. But this one looks more like kind of a project, and I think we're a couple away from a solid race, so I'm going to pass. Unfaithful Ways is very interesting in that this is technically a race for non-winners of 2 lifetime, yet this one has 3 wins and has done so in open company in claiming. And that's a pretty good stat. Usually those $50,000 claimers are nothing to sneeze at. They can be pretty tough races. And so this is the second start off the layoff, and I think it's logical to assume that this one will be moving forward. Jeff Mullins is an underrated turf trainer. He does very well on the turf in California, so I kind of like this one's chances as a bit of a sleeper, and I think you should use. Anisette is coming. The main thing is that all the races have been overseas and they've been on synthetic, not on turf, which is rather strange. And more than anything else, the last race in particular was a really low-class level race. And whenever you have a horse who runs a big race when the class is a lot lower than they are, it kind of gives mixed signals, like they have to have it that low. They dropped this horse 3 times class-wise to get that kind of performance. So that gives me a little bit of concern. Leonard Powell's not known for doing real well with first-time shippers from overseas. So I'll wait one, and I have a feeling this one's not at the same class level necessary to win. Vladimir Serin's got another one in here, Speed Lane. And again, you got Kent DeSormo aboard, and he is a great turf rider when he's on. And so that's a real big positive to me. This one is a class fit, I believe, has been, run in it fairly competitively for a while, and is coming second off the layoff and moving route to sprint, and or sprint to route rather. And those are all positive angles for Vladimir Serin. And you see when he's been going with Kent DeSormo, he's doing it at this meet at 38% win rate. So I think there's some positive signals here. And in a race that's fairly wide open, I think this one's a good use at 12-1. Lady J just doesn't really look good enough to me. Has been, has had a few efforts at the sprint level, at the graded stakes level, I guess, that were okay. But I just, the last couple really weren't that inspiring, and I just kind of think this one's a little off form right now, and probably seems a little better suited for more of a sprint type of race than a mile at around 2 turns. And you also see that they were willing to get rid of this horse for $25,000 a few back, and that always is kind of a red flag to me. Granted, there's been some good performances since then, but I just always have that back in my mind. If you need to go to the 25,000 claim level to jack up and get your career or close to career high buyer, then I don't know. Maybe it's maybe this is a little too much for you. So anyway, I mean, I just don't see enough here to get excited about. That's the bottom line. So I'm going to pass. Magic Light is kind of interesting. You got Neil Drysdale, who's a trainer who is pretty persnickety, places his horses very well. This one is coming third off the layoff, and while it says he ran identical buyers, there were better class efforts each time. So this one is on the upswing. Would need a step forward to be a factor here, and it's certainly possible. It's just you're parked out in the 11 hole, and this one likes to run a little close to the pace. So I think it's a bit of a challenge. Maybe with a better pole position, I would be a little more interested. But at 20-1, I could see using this horse for sure. Glen All, I really like this horse. If you watch that last race at the option 50 level, he basically ran 2 miles in that race. He was wide the entire race, like 4, 5, 6 wide all the way around the track, and still had plenty enough to come from the clouds and win this. That's a horse in good form. And you've got Umberto Rispoli aboard, and this one I just really think is looking awful good to me and seems to be on an upward trend. And granted, the 12 hole is not the best place to be, but again, that last race, the horse was wide all the way around, and it didn't seem to bother whatsoever. So I think this one is a great value at 6-1 and is an absolute use. The also eligibles, we have She's a Joker. This is another one by Peter Miller. He does have a horse in this race. This one looks okay. I mean, nothing really to write home about. Hasn't won in a while, and I don't know. I just didn't get a real good vibe looking at this one, so I'd probably pass. Corporal Violet is P.J. Gallagher. This one was running overseas quite a bit and had the first effort at a 6.5 furlong sprint, and was kind of up the track, didn't do terribly well. I didn't look to have a lot of great success at some of the more prominent tracks. So, I mean, I don't know. This one, you want to roll the dice and take them at 12-1, be my guess, but I think I'd probably pass. The last leg of the late pick 4 is the 10th race, and it's an allowance N1X for non-winners 2 lifetime 3-year-olds and up, and it's run on the downhill turf course, and that's very important because this is very different than other turf sprints in that you do have a hill from the chute. So experience over the course is vitally important here. Some horses can handle it, some cannot, and that same can be said for jockeys, so it's something to think about. Case in point, Vancouver, number 1. Jeff Mullen's good turf trainer, and this one's been pretty good. You notice the effort on February 20th on the downhill course was not so great. And you also note that Hector Barrios was riding him as he is today. And my experience with Hector Berrios is he's not terribly good when running on the downhill turf course. So just something to keep in mind. And for that reason, I'm going to pass. Minister Shane, conversely, has a win in a couple of seconds on the downhill course. And that's really important to note. This one has been running against Statebred Company for the most part and looks a little light on the buyer department, but maybe an upgrade to a degree because of the good experience on the downhill course. And that's something maybe you want to think about. Carlo Gaines is a good turf trainer. Her barn's a little cold right now, but at 8-1, this is one maybe you want to think about as a possible. Augusta Melody is, is run against. I don't see enough here to get me really excited. You can see that he has run on this course before, did get a second, so that's a little something. But generally, I just, this one's okay. Doesn't seem to have a real big will to win. I don't know. I just run at the starter allowance level a couple of times. Seems a little cut below. It's you get 10-1. I mean, I don't see where there's some big improvement here. You consider kind of limped in. The last two before the freshening weren't terribly good, and it looked like they were bumping this one up in Class 2 to a degree. So I'm just not sure. The last effort was on the downhill course and wasn't very good. So I could go either way with this one. I'll leave it up to you. Kid Azteca, I think, is interesting. Sharp Azteca is a pretty good sire, and I think this one, while the buyers look a little light to me, this is second off the layoff. This one debuted with a career-high buyer at 3. And so, granted, this is against older, but you got Juan Hernandez, and Peter Miller and Juan Hernandez connected 30% this meet. So I think there's some good intentions here. I'll fully expect this one to run a solid race, and I would use. King Apollo is a logical win candidate here. The last race in particular just demonstrated a really big kick, was just a little late to the dance. But I think this one is certainly a class fit, is improving, ran the career high buyer the last time. And I think this one's logical as a win candidate. It never hurts to have Kent DeSormo, again, a great turf rider. And there's a race that I had to watch for this field, and he pulled off an upset at 17-1 on the downhill course. And so he obviously really understands how to ride it. And you got to upgrade any horse that gets Kent DeSormo aboard on the turf. Nero Tulip looks to me a cut below and really hasn't fired very well since coming over from Ireland. And those efforts weren't much to speak of either. Did get a win in the last start there, but it was on synthetic. Has had a couple races at a mile, one at a mile and an eighth. So they're cutting this one back. It looks like they're sort of trying to find a place for him. Peter Yurton is a hot barn right now, but this isn't an angle that's coming off a long layoff that's particularly good. You do get route to sprint, and the downhill course does tend to play like a mile because of the hill. So there's a little something there to think about, but I'm going to look elsewhere. Do It for Andrew is likely going to be the speed of the speed in this race, and it's trained by Phil D'Amato. You got Flavian Pratt aboard, so those are great connections. But the last race in particular, and that was the one I was talking about, One Flew South was 17-1, and DeSormo brought it home. This one, if you see, tends to give it up at the end, tends to fold. And so I think this one will certainly be the early pace factor. And maybe, you do have some experience over the course, but I just don't like horses who wilt that easily in the stretch, and I can go either way with this one. Brady Boy is trained by Van Belvoir, and this one really just doesn't look good enough, and to me, just looks a little light, and it's a first move to turf. And Twirling Candy's a pretty good first-time turf sire, but I didn't see much on the dam side, and it looks to me like you're just trying to figure out what to do with this horse, and I just really don't like his chances going. It's a pretty big ask first-time turf. Subsidized, the last race I watched did not look comfortable on the downhill course. That was the bottom line. In particular, going down the hill really was giving Johnny V all he could handle. And so from that perspective, I downgrade this one's chances a little bit. You can see the numbers are fairly competitive, and this one's been in class for a while, and excuse me, has done okay. I mean, but it was all on the flat courses. The downhill to me was more indicative of a horse who just doesn't like to run on the course. I might be wrong, but that's what I saw. And I third off the layoff. There's some things to like here, but I'm just going to look elsewhere. Just didn't like what I saw. Wi-Fire is trained by Mark Latt. You got Umberto Rispoli aboard. It's third off the layoff, and moving from dirt back to turf is not the greatest angle for Mark Latt, but you do note it was taken off the turf, so there wasn't intent there. I think this one's a pretty good class fit, and has been won the last couple, and so I see no reason not to include this one. At 6-1, I think you're a pretty good price. Danzig Rinka is another Neil Drysdale, and I think you just have to take them seriously because of the way he places them. You see this one has run on the downhill turf and has got a win, and seems to be trending upward the last couple of races. I do see a little bit of a Z pattern there for the last 4 races, but I think that that last race would probably be pretty competitive in this field, and I think at 15-1, that's a pretty good price, and I would consider using. Mastermind, I don't really see much here. Had to drop to 18.5 to break the maiden, and did okay in the claiming ranks at a mile. But this is an allowance field. It seems like a bit of a class hike, and I don't know that this one's really competitive at this level, so I would probably pass. Here's what a ticket looks like for the late pick 4. In the 7th, we're going to use 1, 2, and 8. In the 8th, we're going to use 1 and 4, basically the 2 Baffords. One of them's going to win it, I think. And in the 9th, we're going to spread a little bit. It's a pretty wide open race. We're going to use the 1, 2, 7, 9, and 12. And in the 10th, it's another one that you have to spread a bit. I think we're going to use the 4, 5, 10, and 11. So 3 times 2 is 6, times 5 is 30, times 4 is 120. That's a $60 ticket. And you do have a little bit of chalk in the first 2 stakes races. So we want to keep the ticket size fairly small, but I think that gives us some pretty good options, particularly late, to take it down. I think that Shoemaker mile in particular is a pretty cool race. There's a lot of options, and it should be pretty exciting. The Hollywood Gold Cup small field looks pretty straightforward, and we'll just hope we'll get one of the Baffords home. And then the other 2 are fairly wide open, so I think it's a pretty competitive sequence, pretty challenging, and hopefully we've got enough options to take it down. And, of course, I hope our analysis helps you formulating your own tickets. We will have more with the Belmont Card Series, and we're getting closer to the Belmont Stakes itself, so be on the lookout for the elements of handicapping. We'll be getting that up and running pretty soon. And I've got a couple other ideas about some other features we're going to add to that to give you some more information and help inform your decision a little better. Of course, if you do like what you see here, please like and subscribe, and we do thank you for coming by. I'll be talking to you in the very near future, and until then, be well.